These people are neoliberals who fundamentally delude about the function of government being to redistribute. Yeah, in the long arc of history, it might be that neoliberals end up being more like evil and more, not evil, evil's the wrong word. It might be true, but like, I think that neoliberals represent a much, 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 much more destructive force for America than fascism in the long arc, you know? Everything that America was that was good has been torn apart by Reagan and people like Reagan. Fascism is a naturally unstable blip. Neoliberalism is stable. It's bad, then it's stable. It's a slow grinding death, exactly. Obviously, fascism is a lot more immediately murderous and a lot more flashy. But I wonder, after the Trump regime is done, and it will be, you know, he's an old man, and the Republicans will eventually, you know, collapse on themselves. They can't rule. They're not capable of ruling. The real fight really is with these motherfuckers, you know? Because fascism is so easy to argue against. Not that arguing wins you the day, but like the line between us and them is very easy, very clear. But the business community and the control they have over this country at every level, and people like this, man. Are we the baddies? Well, not me. I'm not a neoliberal. Are you a neoliberal? I think liberals are responsible not for making things bad, but for not making things better. Yeah, but the current like wave of fascism was caused by liberals. Like, you can trace a pretty direct line from neoliberalism, grinding austerity, social alienation, to the prominence of fascist movements in Western Europe and America today. Not in all countries around the world. I certainly wouldn't blame neoliberalism for, say, authoritarianism in China. They're authoritarian and, in some respects, neoliberal, but it's complicated and multifaceted. Man, I'm glad to see fascists apparently have no agency. Don't be snarky with me, subs and soda. But also, to an extent, fascist movements, well, people rarely have agency when you're looking at things from like a top-down perspective. You usually look at it in like a historical forces kind of sense. Certainly, Trump has very little personal agency ideologically. He just wants to see people applaud for him. I don't know, man. When we look back from a like 100 or 1,000 years from now, when we take a look at America and what destroyed it, let's just say over a certain time period, you know, 1776 to 2050, okay? And we take a look at what was done. Who had the agency? Fascism might hasten the conditions of collapse, but like, I think it's pretty obvious what set everything up this way, right? The grinding of everything in our country to bits, the systemic like gatekeeping of any left progressive politics, but the allowance of right fascist politics in, like, there's, I don't know, hoarding of wealth, alienation, economic impoverishment, inequality. It's a bunch of stuff. It's a bunch of stuff. I don't know. They really do hate leftists more than liberals, more than fascists. Well, I hate the Democrats the most, that's for sure. But liberals more than fascists? No, because the average liberal is not like morally culpable at all in any of this, right? Like, that's kind of the point. The fascist is faux populist, so they try to get people up in the ideology, you know, rah, 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 let's go. They try to bring everyone on board. The average fascist voter, like a voter who is aligned with that movement, is personally reprehensible, you know? And any individual fascist is much, much worse than any individual liberal in terms of moral culpability in their positions. Because no liberal signs off on the total consumption of everything by capital, right? Like, liberals at the most, when they have economic positions, are usually just kind of like laissez-faire leaning, but a lot of liberals also like government intervention. They're kind of wishy-washy about it, you know? They're like, oh yeah, businesses do good things, but the government can do good things too. The average liberal that I've heard is like, you know, if Britain can have healthcare, then why can't we? You know, they're not really like committed to Ayn Rand style free market economics or whatever. But neoliberalism isn't like the economic policies of neoliberals are not dictated by the wishy-washy beliefs of the constituency that votes them in because they're slightly nicer than the other guy. liberals are educated to complacency. So the average liberal, no, I would never blame them, and I would never hate them for being a liberal. But from an institutional perspective, fascists don't build institutions, or at least they're very, very bad at it, right? Like, what institutions has Trump built? Doge, I guess, has happened under him, I guess. There's ICE, but ICE was, you know, essentially empowered by Obama, so I don't really know if we can hand that to him. Like, what institutions? Yeah, they co-opt institutions. They break institutions down, but they don't really build them. But liberals and neoconservatives, but they're also liberals in the economic sense, have built institutions that are so powerful that if they're even slightly altered, it threatens to destroy the world, right? Like fractional reserve banking, or more contemporarily, you know, quantitative easing. The idea of building an economy where you borrow to invest, to borrow to invest, to borrow to invest. There are like systems within capital that are minute and nobody understands them and nobody knows how they work and nobody votes for them. Nobody votes for or against quantitative easing, you know, right? Nobody votes for or against Palantir or the surveillance state. But these institutions are pervasive and very effective. And they do exactly what they're meant to do. You know, quantitative easing may, you know, boost the economy, but it also leads to the rapid acceleration of income inequality, right? Enormous amounts of wealth pooled at the top. The fractional reserve banking gives banks an enormous amount of power and allows business and investment to accelerate their holdings very, very quickly. Does it increase like economic inequality? Sure, but they're fine with that, so it doesn't really matter, you know? It's the line go up ideology. I guess the big threat is that, so from my perspective, the Federal Reserve as it exists right now is very, very bad. I'm not against the Federal Reserve in concept. I don't believe in a gold standard. I don't think that would improve anything. But the way the Federal Reserve operates right now, I think is very bad. So if tomorrow Mamdani was made president of the United States, dictator of the United States, and he had limitless power, you know what he could do with very little consequence, right? He could do this. He could fix this quite easily. He could get rid of Doge. He could get rid of ICE. He could break the Department of Homeland Security in half. There are lots of things that he could fix about our immigration policy, about our the way we treat immigrants, of course, but also like the way we police in this country from a federal level. He could do that, and you know what? If it was done effectively, he could do it quickly. He could not dismantle the Federal Reserve. Nobody could. He could not undo the global dollar or the petrodollar. He couldn't stop fractional reserve banking. Or if he could, it would take decades of insanely intense. It would be like an internal class war. It wouldn't just be like, well, he would have to be strong on it. It would have to be like a monstrously involved, extremely thorough, but also very careful effort. And it would take so long, and I don't know if he could do it without breaking everything. And by breaking everything, I don't mean like gas prices go up. I mean like billions dead from starving. You understand what I mean? This is what I mean about like the sinister, like the neoliberals being the real enemy. I shouldn't say neoliberals. I guess I should just say like capital, but neoliberals made capitalism this way. Capitalism did not used to look like this. This is the extent to which this is blown up is a relatively modern phenomenon, you know? And the average neoliberal, the average self-described neoliberal is a 17-year-old with a globe emoji on Twitter, you know, and they're just like a policy wonk. And I don't really hate them. They're annoying. You know, they're like smarmy know-it-alls. But, what, you know, I think that a lot of them have, like, at the very least, they care about the issues, you know. At the very least, like oftentimes they're out there, you know, Will Stancil arguing with fascists about how it's actually better for the economy for immigrants to be let in. Whatever. Oftentimes they're right. But they're not the ones signing off on the fractional reserve banking, are they? The self-described neoliberals are not the ones going out there and saying, what if we built a financial megastructure that is impossibly powerful and can't be deconstructed without killing millions? You know, they're not the ones doing that. Nobody voted for that. Nobody voted for that. Sorry, I'm just ranting. The problem is that liberals, self-described liberals and neoliberals, are trained to take stuff like what she says seriously. And if dictator Khalif Mamdani tried to undo the complicated global economic system that has entrapped all of us, liberals are conditioned to speak against him by listening to people like her, sensible business leaders. You know, it's like people plugged into the Matrix, right? Like they don't know that they're protecting the system. You understand what I'm talking about, right? Fascists are stupid pawns of their leaders, but they are usually ideologically keyed into the end goal, right? The fascist leader wants apartheid, wants racism, wants war. So they convince the stupid followers, the pawns, the dumb animals that follow them, to want war, to want racism, to want apartheid, to want whatever, right? Like, they're in lockstep on that. Not to a full extent, but largely. But I think that there's such a big disconnect. You know what Obama was talking about when he was in the White House, okay? I mean, he was talking about a lot of stuff, but people like Obama or Hillary Clinton or whatever, neoliberal leaders, Bill Clinton, any of these people, okay? What they're talking about has nothing to do with what their voters are talking about. And it was the case with Reagan too. Same with Reagan. No connection, I guarantee you. Trump is uniquely authentic in this respect, again, because he's just in it for the applause. But I guarantee you that these people, the difficulty for people like Obama or whoever else, whatever, neoliberal, neoconservative, is that they have these closed door, behind the scenes meetings that are all about capitulation to capital, capitulation to the machine. They're all about diligently enacting sensible business practices. And then they have to go out there and give a speech to the American people, and they have to pretend that they're up there for, like, you know, political reasons. Like they're up there to, like, for this bill or to push for this social cause or whatever. They're not talking about that behind the scenes. They're having dinner with business moguls talking about how it would slightly benefit their bottom line if, like, the you know, the interest rate was cut by the Fed by 0.25%. You know, that's what they're talking about, but they don't go out there and talk about that to the public. You get me. Is this fine for you, Subs and Soda, you piece of shit? To be clear, it's not neoliberals are more evil than fascists. It's complicated. Fascists take the cake there. It's that in terms of the institutions, that have been built, the neoliberal ones, or sort of capital in its modern incarnation, is much more sinister. Much more sinister. Much more difficult to root up. I think a good way of thinking about it is that you can have an economically transformative revolution in a society like early 20th century Russia, or early 20th century China, or mid 20th century Vietnam. These are societies that are economically primitive enough that you can have a revolution where the new doctrine, the new economic modality is very different, but you can still have a functioning society at the other end. Of course, the revolution is still bloody, difficult business, but you can do it, right? You can't do that in America today. I don't think you can. I don't think you could have a Mao or a Ho Chi Minh in America. I don't think you could. where you have a guy in like one corner of the country, and that guy is like, I'm gonna liberate America, and then you go, ooh, because the way our economy is built prohibits that kind of change. It's all too meticulous. We're completely captured. We're like flies in a web. It's terrifying. This is what motivates a lot of people to accelerationism, you know, the idea that it's not that you want to bring about collapse to end capitalism. It's that capitalism will inevitably collapse, and that there is no way to shift people away from it without the collapse. I don't necessarily believe that, at least not in its most severe version, but I'm sympathetic to the idea, at least. How does this relate to Marx saying that capitalism is a needed stepping stone to communism? I still agree with that sentiment, but Marx also didn't see capitalism in this form. Marx didn't see quantitative easing. Marx didn't see the Federal Reserve, the end of the gold standard. Marx didn't see fractional reserve banking in the form that it exists now. Marx didn't see income inequality like this. I'm not saying he couldn't have predicted it. What I'm saying is there is a stage of capitalism that is helpful, and then there are stages that are not. I think that capitalism up until, I don't know, the Second World War, you have industrialization, you have the development of a robust democratic civil society, you have a rapid increase in the efficiency with which you can produce things, right? There was a post-war boom where America was basically like the only developed country making things, because all the other developed countries have been bombed to shit over in Europe, you know? We were like the guys making stuff. And for a while, we were making things, really, really making things. And I think that capitalism does incentivize a kind of productive efficiency there. But now, what does capitalism lead to with regards to production? Well, capitalism helps us develop Palantir using cheaply available surveillance technology that we buy parts from China, and Chinese workers produce the shit that then gets sent over here. We don't produce anything locally. The only thing, we effectively have like a service economy with minimal productive abilities. So it's not a matter of like efficiency, and the efficiency entails this like international dependence, which makes it difficult to do anything like transformative locally. Oh, it's a nightmare. I think there was a chunk of time where capitalism laid the groundwork for what could have been like meaningful development, and we are well past that point, and now we're at the point where capitalism is so rooted and entrenched that I don't even know what the fuck you'd have to do to change anything for the better. Would you say FDR was more hurtful than helpful in the long term because of this? I think some people make that argument, and I think there's some merit to that argument. FDR was probably, at least with regard to economic issues, the best president. But yeah, there's a reason people say FDR saved capitalism. So yeah, I don't know. It depends on how cynical you want to be. FDR objectively made the world better for a lot of people. Maybe not so many Japanese, but if you're American, or frankly, if you're a Western European, FDR and his leadership was pretty instrumental to a lot of good things, you know, but he definitely did save capitalism, yeah. Polish people hate FDR, Vaush, Lamau, I don't know why. Maybe it's because he didn't push east enough when liberating Europe. All right, I gotta stop rambling about this. I don't know. I'm just a yippin' and a yappin'. Do you think social democratic reforms are counterproductive in the long run then? No. Look, I don't know what the right ratio of like suffering in the short term for the long-term benefit. I don't know what works, right? Because we've never seen it happen. There has never been a successful socialist revolution in a modern capitalist economy. It has never happened. Maybe it will in the future, and then I'll have an opinion on it, but I don't really know. Don't worry, I'm working on it. Happy to hear that. Myanmar rebels in some limited respects? No. Myanmar does not have a developed, modern capitalist economy. Also, they haven't succeeded yet. Myanmar's almost feudal. Well, it's easy to take over a fucking feudal society. You literally just, like, storm the castle, and once you're in there, you're the new lord, you know? It's nowadays, it's like, you can be the president, but it doesn't even matter. Like, Trump's the president, but it doesn't even matter. I don't know. What about Rojava? Not exactly a developed modern capitalist economy. All right.